Prepare for a longer and more in-depth video. COVID-19 has changed the fundamental fabric of our day-to-day lives. It has obliterated the economy, thrown our leadership into chaos, and forced us into a societal lockdown. Originally from Wuhan, China, COVID rapidly spread throughout the world, inciting mass chaos and panic in millions of people across the world. The virus's contagious nature put a massive strain on hospitals and displayed systematic flaws within healthcare systems everywhere. However, the virus not only exposed the healthcare system, but also gave us key insight into China's domestic and international policies. The circadian rhythm of Chinese statesmanship has been disrupted, calling into questions China's role in the economy and region. On top of this, the pandemic has only promoted the narrative of tension between China and the West, especially the United States of America. China today is caught at a crossroads, its present and future in jeopardy. In today's video, we'll examine China in its current COVID-19 state and analyze its shortcomings as well as its strengths. Even though the pandemic is still a clear and present danger around the world, leaders of many advanced Western nations have publicly discussed plans to encourage their businesses to move to manufacture away from China, partly as a form of punishment and partly due to national security issues. The moves being discussed will build on the existing migration by US, Japanese, and European firms away from the country due to the trade war and rising labor costs. However, manufacturing moving out of China is not a given, as China has shown time and again that it has a strong, dependable workforce with over 1 billion people at a relatively low cost. The sentiments are reflected by an automobile executive who states there are lots of discussions going on about supply chains, about diversification, but none of these conversations are about reshoring. Similarly, a survey of the American Chamber of Commerce based in Shanghai stated 70% of respondents were not thinking of moving their supply chains out of China due to the virus. This isn't to say, though, that China's position is secure, though, as governments are currently too occupied with the matter at hand to come up with concrete plans to back up their worlds. And because the new epoch marked by the virus has only just begun, big changes like these do not happen on short timescales. However, the ingredients needed for change have definitely materialized due to COVID-19. Xi Jinping and Beijing are preparing for a global backlash as the pandemic shuts down much of the world's economy, with Xi saying that the country must get ready for external adversity and challenges in the long run following the COVID-19 outbreak. While at home, China faces its deepest economic contraction in nearly a century. Leaders of G7 nations have indicated, using various levels of diplomatic language, their strong dismay at China's lack of transparency and general mishandling of the initial outbreak, with some, such as the US and Australia, going as far to say that they should investigate the virus's origins in Wuhan, China. On the other hand, the country has embarked on a propaganda campaign in an attempt to narrate itself as the fire chief in the pandemic fight. And this has led to antipathy, according to some Chinese officials. On a broader note, China's high-profile actions, from widely advertised donations of medical equipment to quote-unquote wolf warrior diplomacy by its embassies, do not seem to be having their intended effect and have been labeled by some as disaster opportunism. They're likely to further strain Beijing's relations, even with previously friendly countries, at a time when a better course of action would be to quote-unquote lie low. Amid headlines about decoupling and isolating China, the fundamental of the country as the world's largest manufacturer and consumer market remains intact. Companies like Elon Musk's Tesla enjoy a high volume of sales in this market that, quote-unquote, can't be neglected, said a former director at a think tank owned by the Ministry of State Security. Quote, China will be the center of gravity in the East Asia bloc. That has been decided by China's industrial system and the vast market size, end quote. He continued. A researcher affiliated with State Council Research Center said that because China is globally competitive in virtually every industrial sector, China's industrial power cannot fail, and that Western countries leaving China is a non-issue. However, the optimism of these interviewees do not seem to be shared by the big man Xi himself, who listed among his top priorities in the pandemic's fallout, protecting a stable supply chain and a value chain, and gave instructions to prepare for lasting change in the outside world. Both are pivots from the period of strategic opportunity that no longer appears on official documents. At the same time, China's commitment to its political model of stringent communism has increased. An IR professor at a Chinese university said that the US and China are supposed to cooperate to battle the pandemic, and worries about the widening of the rift between the two, with the Taiwan issue in particular increasing in size as Taiwan has become closer to the United States. He sees the US-Australia operation in the South China Sea as a signal to Southeast Asian countries that no matter how the pandemic develops, the US is still a big brother in the region. The article notes that one of China's theater commands published 4 belligerent articles last week, urging the military to increase combat readiness in light of internal and external threats in and around the South China Sea. Meanwhile, analysts from Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office this month showed an increase for unification by force, as retired generals believe that the US would not go to war over the island nation. A Singaporean scholar called this assumption risky, as US credibility is at stake if it's shown to be unwilling to defend its allies, and that means that the island is a crucial part of US strategy in the region because of not only Chinese deterrence, but COVID-19 as well. A director at a Brussels think tank says that the US has spectacularly failed to lead, but also point out that China has not been able to fill the gap as effectively as Beijing may have hoped. He went on to say that US allies would still prefer avoiding confrontation despite resenting China's assertiveness at the UN. Assertiveness that made it a key contributor to the UN's budget and wanted 4 top positions at the UN's 15 specialized agencies, all while the US disengaged from global agreements and organizations. However, this vacuum left by the United States has not been as much of a boom as China might have hoped. The blame game between the two nations has spilled out into the UN, with China vetoing American efforts to officially lay blame and pointing out to the amount of aid and expertise dispatched, ultimately saying that the centralized system bought valuable time and provided experience for all. The article ends by highlighting the increased headwinds China faces in these organizations. A leader at a research foundation in India says that the WHO's ordeal is part of a wider trend, as global governance structures created at the end of World War II were already unraveling before the pandemic. Quote, "The comfort that many people had a few years back that China may be able to lead the world, that comfort might be going away very rapidly, especially after this pandemic crisis. China will continue to be a part of these organizations, but there will be a lot of pushback from now on. China will find it increasingly difficult to have its way, like it's been having for the last few years at least." He also noted that global governing bodies might become more inclusive of Taiwan due to internal and external pressures. COVID-19 has changed the fabric of our day-to-day lives. China in particular has been affected, changing the way China thinks about itself and how others think about it. The fundamental nature of the Chinese-US relationship has deteriorated, and it is time that things will change between the two superpowers of the world. We are now going to live in a world with increasing polarization, and it is time to understand that the world we know will be different from the world we know starting in the next few years. Thank you. These videos are inspired by a South China Morning Post story of the same name. If you are interested in reading the original links, I will post them in the description below.